If you descend into the ancient Christian catacombs of Rome, you enter a world filled with images of deliverance. Noah safe in the ark, Jonah rescued from the sea, and Christ carrying the lost sheep as the Good Shepherd. But early Christian burial art also preserved something that may surprise modern Christians: the image of a pagan hero bound to the mast of a ship, Odysseus sailing past the sirens. That image did not mean that Christians had adapted Homer's gods or confused Greek mythology with the gospel. It revealed something more interesting about the early church. While the internet is now fighting over casting, costumes, and the latest Hollywood adaptation of Homer's Odyssey, it is missing the older and far more fascinating story. The early Christians did not simply cancel Homer. Writers such as Clement of Alexandria read him critically. They rejected the immoral gods of Greek mythology, but they also recognized that the pagan world sometimes contained fragments of truth, human longings, moral insights, and images that could be examined in the light of Christ. And when later Christian preachers considered Odysseus strapped to the wooden mast, while the sirens sang around him, they saw more than an adventurous sailor escaping a monster. They saw the human soul passing through a world of temptation. They saw the wood of the cross, and they saw a man surviving because he had bound himself before the seductive voices began to the one thing that could prevent him from steering toward destruction. That isn't just pagan fiction. That is a picture of the Christian soul trying to reach its true home. Hi, I am Ada, and this is I Am Catholic, the podcast for everyday believers who want to live this our beautiful faith with fire. Today, we are unlocking the 3,000-year-old spiritual code hidden inside Homer's Odyssey and why it might just change how you navigate your own life. Most people encounter the Odyssey as an adventure story. There is a war hero trying to get home. There are monsters, shipwrecks, strange islands, dangerous women, angry gods, and a wife waiting in Ithaca while a crowd of suitors consume her husband's estate. It is dramatic, violent, strange, and memorable. Now that the Odyssey has returned to popular conversation, much of the attention has gone to the usual places. Who is playing home? Whether the adaptation will be faithful to Homer, whether ancient stories should be modernized, and whether Hollywood can touch anything without turning it into a cultural argument. Those debates may be entertaining, but they are not the most interesting thing about the Odyssey. The real power of the Odyssey lies elsewhere. Odysseus is not simply trying to travel from one location to another. He is trying to return to the place that gives meaning to everything else. He has already won the war. He has already proved his intelligence, courage, and military skill. He has already become famous. Yet, none of those achievements can give him what he wants most. He wants to go home. That longing is what makes the Odyssey more than a story about survival. It is a story about memory, temptation, identity, purification, and the danger of becoming comfortable in places where we were never meant to remain. The early Christians understood that pagan literature could contain fragments of truth. They did not confuse Greek mythology with revelation. They did not treat Homer as scripture, but they also did not assume that everything outside the visible boundaries of the church was empty of meaning. They looked at the great stories of the ancient world and asked a serious question. What does the human heart reveal about itself even before it knows Christ? One scene in the Odyssey especially captured the Christian imagination. Odysseus is tied to the mast while the sirens sing. He survives because he is bound to wood. Early Christian teachers saw in that scene an image of the soul fastened to the cross while passing through a world filled with seduction. That is the doorway into what I am calling the Catacomb code of the Odyssey. Not a secret message placed there by Homer, not an attempt to baptize every monster and every island, rather a Christian way of reading the story, a way of seeing how an ancient pagan journey can illuminate the soul's struggle to return to God. 3 moments in the poem deserve our attention. 1 is the lotus eaters, 2, the sirens, and 3, the return of the king in disguise. Together, they tell us something unsettling about the spiritual journey. The soul does not always lose its way through open rebellion. Sometimes it forgets where it was going. Sometimes it hears a voice more attractive than the truth. And sometimes it allows strangers to occupy the house because the rightful king seems absent. Odysseus and his men arrive among the lotus eaters early in the journey. The danger does not appear dangerous. No one attacks them. No one draws a sword. No one threatens to imprison them. Some of the men are simply given lotus to eat. Once they taste it, they no longer want to return to the ships. They lose interest in Ithaca. They forget why they began the journey. The lotus does not kill them. It does something worse. It removes the desire for home. It alters the mind, and they forget their mission. There are forms of destruction that announce themselves loudly. We usually recognize them: violence, betrayal, addiction, scandal, catastrophe. The lotus is different. It leaves the person alive and comfortable. Nothing appears to be wrong. The men are not in pain. They are not begging for rescue. They are content. And that is precisely the problem. They have forgotten who they are. A person can remain productive, admired, financially successful, socially active, and spiritually asleep. One can build a career, raise a family, maintain a calendar, attend events, watch the news, follow politics, and consume an endless stream of religious content without ever asking whether the soul is moving toward God. We often imagine spiritual decline as a dramatic rejection of faith, and sometimes it is much more quieter. Prayer becomes occasional. Silence becomes uncomfortable. The sacraments become routine. The conscience is dulled by a constant noise. The desire for holiness slowly gives way to the desire to be left alone. Nothing has exploded. No great scandal has occurred. The person has simply lost the taste for hope. The Catholic tradition calls one form of this condition acedia. It is commonly translated as sloth, but laziness is too narrow a word. Acedia is a weariness of the soul in relation to the good. It resists the demands of love, vocation, prayer, and perseverance. It does not always produce inactivity, it can produce frantic activity. A person may become busy precisely to avoid the work of the soul. There is always one more email, one more meeting, one more program, just one more episode, one more article, or one more crisis, one more thing that must be done before one can sit still before God. We can become very efficient at avoiding the only question that matters. What is all this for? The lotus eaters are not merely people who enjoy pleasure. They are people who have allowed pleasure to erase purpose. That is why the scene speaks so clearly to modern consumer culture. Our world is skilled at keeping us occupied. It offers food, entertainment, shopping, outreach, commentary, travel, ambition, self-improvement, and endless opportunities for distraction. None of these things is evil in itself. The danger lies in their ability to fill every empty space. But the soul needs some emptiness. It needs quiet, some discomfort of remembering that no earthly achievement can fully satisfy it. When every silence is filled, the longing for God can be mistaken for boredom. When every discomfort is medicated, the awareness of exile disappears. When every desire is answered immediately, the soul loses the strength to wait for what is greater. Odysseus has to force his men back to the ships. They do not rescue themselves. They do not suddenly remember their families and run gratefully toward the sea. They resist. This is one of the harder truths in the story. Sometimes the person who is restoring us to reality feels like the person who is taking away our happiness. For example, when a parent removes the screen, when the spouse raises an uncomfortable truth, when the priest calls us back to confession, when the church refuses to bless what is harming us. Grace interrupts, and because we have grown accustomed to the lotus, interruption feels cruel. But there is a difference between peace and numbness. There's a difference between rest and surrender. There's a difference between enjoying life and forgetting life's destination, life's purpose. The spiritual life begins with memory. The church understands this deeply. At the center of the Mass is remembrance. Not sentimental recollection, not nostalgia, a sacred remembering of Christ's death and resurrection, and of the covenant into which we have been drawn. The liturgy keeps calling the soul back to reality. You belong to God. You were redeemed at a cost. You are passing through this world, and you are not home yet. The first great danger in the Odyssey, then, is not the monster that devours, it is the pleasure that makes the travelers forget. The sirens. The sirens present a different danger. The men among the lotus eaters forget the journey. Odysseus, facing the sirens, remembers the journey but still wants to hear the song. He knows the song is deadly. He knows sailors have been drawn toward the rocks. He knows intelligence alone will not protect him. So he makes a decision before the temptation begins. His crew must block their ears with wax. He must be tied to the mast. Once the sirens begin to sing, no one is to obey him if he begs to be released. This scene contains a remarkably mature understanding of human weakness. Odysseus knows that a decision made in clarity may have to govern him later when clarity is gone. He does not assume that because he understands the danger, he will remain immune to it. He does not say, I know myself, I can handle this. He builds the strength into the journey. Modern culture tends to treat restraints as an enemy of freedom. We are told that authenticity means following desire and that any external limit is suspect. But the person who follows every desire is not necessarily free. He may simply be easy to manipulate. Every appetite has a voice. Every temptation makes an argument. Some voices sound harsh and ugly. They are easy to reject. The dangerous ones sound reasonable. They promise relief, recognition, pleasure, vindication, a chance to become the person we think we deserve to be. The sirens do not need to push Odysseus toward the rocks. They only need to make destruction sound beautiful. That is why discipline matters. Discipline is not the denial of freedom, it is the protection of freedom from the momentary self. The vows of marriage protect love from moods. The discipline of prayer protects faith from spiritual dryness. Fasting exposes the appetite before they become masters. Confession prevents sin from building a private kingdom in the soul. The commandments draw lines before desire begins negotiating. These practices are sometimes described as burdens imposed from outside. A Catholic understanding sees them differently. They are ropes tied to the mast. They hold us to a decision made in truth when feeling later becomes unreliable. Early Christian teachers recognized the symbolic power of this sin. Odysseus survives the sirens because he is fastened to the wood. The Christian survives the seductions of the world by clinging to the cross. The comparison is not exact. Odysseus is not Christ. Homer was not writing a prophecy of Calvary, but the image is too powerful to dismiss. A man passes through a deadly sea while bound to a wooden beam. Around him, voices promising knowledge and delight. His safety depends on remaining attached to what prevents him from following them. The cross performs a similar work in the Christian life. It contradicts the world's most persuasive lies. The world says power is found in domination. The cross reveals power in self-giving love. The world says suffering makes life meaningless, but the cross shows that suffering can be united to redemption. And the world says freedom means avoiding sacrifice. The cross reveals that love without sacrifice is usually only appetite wearing expensive perfume. To remain near the cross is to remain near a judgment on our desires. That is why we often resist it. We prefer Christianity that comforts without restraining, consoles without correcting, and promises resurrection without asking us to die to anything. But a cross that never limits us will never save us from the sirens. Odysseus begs to be released once the song begins. His crew refuses. At that moment, the ropes appear to oppose his will. In reality, they preserve the deeper will he expressed before temptation clouded his judgment. There are moments in every serious Christian life when fidelity feels like confinement. The marriage vow feels narrow, the moral law feels severe, prayer feels dry, the church's teachings feels inconvenient. The cross seems to stand between us and a life that appears easier. That is when The earlier decision matters. The decision made in light, the decision to belong to Christ, even when the heart becomes unstable. The lesson of the sirens is not that Christians should fear beauty, knowledge, pleasure, or culture. It is that no one should assume immunity from seduction. The person who knows his weakness is often safer than the person who celebrates his strength. The long road back. By the time Odysseus reaches Ithaca, much has been taken from him. The fleet is gone. The crew is gone. The spoils of war are gone. The triumphant return he might once have imagined is gone. He reaches home stripped of the visible signs of victory. This gives the Odyssey a purgatorial quality. It is not an allegory of purgatory in the strict theological sense. Homer was not describing the purification of souls after death. But the story understands something Catholic theology also understands. Homecoming may require purification. Odysseus cannot simply carry every habit of war into the peace of Ithaca. He has survived by cunning, force, endurance, and deception. Those qualities may help a man conquer a city. They do not necessarily teach him how to live faithfully in his own house. The journey removes things from him. It reduces him, exposes him. In the end, he returns without the appearance of greatness. Purgatory is often misunderstood as a final punishment imposed by an angry God. A better way to understand it is as the completion of love's work in a soul that belongs to God but is not yet ready for perfect communion. Heaven is not merely admission into a beautiful place. It is union with God. A soul still clinging to pride, resentment, deception, vanity, or disordered attachment must be healed. Nothing false can survive in the full presence of truth. Nothing selfish can remain untouched in the full presence of love. The journey home, therefore, involves more than distance. It involves transformation. The spiritual question is not only, will I reach God? It is also, what in me must be purified before I can receive what I say I desire. Many people want heaven in the abstract. Fewer want to surrender the habits that make heaven impossible to enjoy. We want peace without forgiveness, holiness without discipline, communion without obedience, resurrection without death. Odysseus reaches Ithaca only after the journey has dismantled the man who left Troy. The Christian journey also dismantles illusions, the illusion of control, the illusion of self-sufficiency, the illusion that reputation is identity, and that intelligence can save us from moral consequence, the illusion that our gifts make us good. Grace does not destroy the person. It destroys the false structures within which the person has learned to hide. When Odysseus finally returns, he does not enter Ithaca wearing royal robes. He comes disguised as a beggar. Meanwhile, the suitors have occupied his home. They eat his food, waste his wealth, pressure his wife, and behave as though the king's absence has given them ownership. They do not merely want Penelope, they want the future of the house. Their confidence rests on one assumption: Odysseus will not return. Then the king enters and no one recognizes him. This scene carries an unmistakable Christian resonance. Christ comes into the world without the appearance people expect from a king. He is born into poverty. He lives without political power. He moves among the poor, the sick, the unwanted, and the morally compromised. He is dismissed, mocked, and executed. The king enters his own creation in the form of a servant. Even now, Christianity insists that he remains present under appearances. The world finds unimpressive. In the poor, in the suffering, in the inconvenient neighbor, in the confessional, in the Eucharist, in the hiddenness of Christ in one of the great tests of faith. We often say we want God to make himself clear. What we usually mean is that we want him to appear in a form we find convincing. We want majesty without humility, power without vulnerability, glory without the scandal of the cross. The suitors fell because they judge by appearance. The beggar seems weak. The palace appears to belong to them. The king's silence appears to confirm his absence. Then comes the bow. Penelope announces that she will marry the man who can string Odysseus' bow and shoot an arrow through the aligned axe heads. The suitors try and fail. They have consumed the king's goods, but they cannot wield the king's power. They have occupied the house, but they cannot exercise the authority of his true master. Then Odysseus takes the bow. The disguise remains, but identity begins to reveal itself through authority. The bow exposes the difference between possession and legitimacy. The suitors have taken much. They have become comfortable. They have convinced themselves that time has erased the rights of the absent king. Yet, one act reveals that they are still intruders. The soul can also become an occupied house. Fear takes a room. Ambition takes another. Resentment sits at the table. Vanity begins giving orders. Pleasure demands more resources. Political rage, wounded pride, and the need for approval divide the estate among themselves. These forces behave like suitors. They consume, they promise, they make themselves at home. But none of them can do what the rightful king can do. Ambition cannot forgive sin. Pleasure cannot answer death. Approval cannot create identity. Political victory cannot heal the heart. Money cannot reconcile us to God. Every false master eventually meets the bow it cannot string. Christ's authority is not established by appearance, popularity, or cultural power. It is revealed in what he alone can accomplish. He can forgive sins. He restores communion with the Father. He enters death and breaks its finality. He takes an occupied soul and makes it a temple again. The return of Odysseus is violent, and the Christian must not force every detail of that violence into a direct image of Christ. But the moral pattern remains. The rightful king returns. The impostors are exposed. The house is reclaimed. Christianity teaches that Christ will not remain hidden forever. The one who first came in humility will come again in glory. Then every false authority will be measured. Every borrowed throne will be surrendered. Every claim will be tested. The silence of God will be shown not to have been absence. Beyond Ithaca. Odysseus returns to Ithaca. Order is restored. He is reunited with Penelope. The long journey ends, yet the Christian imagination cannot stop there. Ithaca is still part of the moral world. Odysseus will die. Penelope will die. The palace will one day disappear. Even the most beloved earthly home remains vulnerable to time. The desire beneath the Odyssey reaches beyond Ithaca. Human beings do not merely want to return to a place. We want a home that cannot be lost again. We want communion that death cannot break. We want a kingdom no invader can occupy. And we want to be fully known without being rejected. We want the end of exile. The pagan hero struggles across the sea to return to his own country. The gospel reveals something greater. God crosses the distance to recover the wanderer. Christ does not wait in heaven for humanity to navigate its way back. He enters the journey. He enters history. He enters suffering, death. The soul's homecoming becomes possible because God first comes in search of the soul. That is where the Christian reading of the Odyssey reaches its deepest point. The lotus eaters show how easily we forget home. The sirens show how easily desire overpowers knowledge. The disguised king shows how easily we mistake hiddenness for absence. And the long voyage shows that returning home may require the loss of everything false. The ancient story asks whether Odysseus can find his way back to Ithaca. The Christian life asks a more searching question. Can the soul remember the one for whom it was created? Can it resist voices that make destruction sound beautiful? Can it accept purification without mistaking it for abandonment? Can it recognize the king when he comes without spectacle? The answer is not found in human cleverness alone. Odysseus survives by intelligence, endurance, and force of will. The Christian survives by grace. Grace awakens memory. Grace strengthens freedom, purifies desire, reveals the king. The deepest longing in the Odyssey is the longing to return. The deepest promise of Christianity is that home is not merely waiting at the end of the journey. Home has come looking for us, and the name of that home is Jesus the Christ. We are currently working on a special masterclass episode for high achievers and professionals on how to make life-changing decisions like a saint. Stay tuned. And we're also asking you here to help us to grow this channel. It takes a few seconds. Share, like, and we want to hear your feedback. It helps us to serve you better. I am Ada Ebufor, and this is I Am Catholic. See you next time.